So while we wait for everybody to log on, can I just ask you in the meeting chat, just type attending. So everybody that attends the session today will get a copy of the recording. We are recording the whole presentation, which will make it easier for you or for me to send the recording to everybody after the session. Okay, it is 2 o'clock. Not everybody who indicated that they will attend is online, but let's start. I know we are all very busy. It's month end, and it's a day or two before our next long weekend. So let's delve in. If you have not yet in the meeting chat, just type attending. Everybody that attends the meeting will get a recording of the session afterwards. Then just for the presentation, in terms of questions, there is a Q&A button. Any questions that you might have, please type those, record them in the Q&A section. I will go through the presentation and at the end of our session, I will answer as many of the questions as possible. And the ones that I don't get to answer, I will respond via email to everybody that is attending today. So thank you very much for joining today. And I really hope that the session is going to be as informative to all of you as what it has been to the previous people who attended these sessions. Can I just get an indication with the wave of hand? Can everybody hear me clearly? Okay, so at least there's a few people that can hear me. Okay, if you can't hear me, please indicate in the chat that there's a problem there so that we can pay attention to that. So medical certificates, and it's probably one of the most contentious issues when it comes to the management of sick leave. Now, if we just look at absenteeism in South Africa, more or less, absenteeism costs the South African economy billions and billions of rands. There's two figures, the one from the Occupational Care Group South Africa, they're talking about 12 to 16 billion rand per annum. Human Capital Review is talking about 19 billion rand per annum. Now that is a major, major cost. And this is just the cost of paid sick leave. What we need to realize is that there's a direct cost, so paying people for being on sick leave, but there's also an indirect cost. Number one, quite clearly, overall productivity goes down if we don't have our people at work. And it also has a negative impact on the morale of the employees who are at work every day. Now, the management of sick leave is not a once-off process, and I like to compare that with cleaning your kitchen. If you don't clean your kitchen every day, after a week, it's going to be a mess. If you leave it longer, it's going to become such a messy story that you are going to start avoiding your kitchen and you are rather going to get takeaways. Unless you maintain your kitchen, clean it every day, wipe the counters, do the dishes, it's going to become, it's going to be go out of control. And that's exactly the same with absenteeism in the workplace. We have to deal with it on a continuous basis. Managing sick leave and absenteeism is not a once-off process. It is a continuous process. Now, like cleaning your kitchen, if you haven't done it for a long while and you decide to get stuck in and do it, it's going to take more time than what it would ordinarily, on just like cleaning after supper. And then you have to maintain that to make sure that you keep it under control. And at the end of this presentation, I am just going to share with you one of our clients who we have assisted since October last year. And just by being consistent in managing the absenteeism, the significant reduction in sick leave that this client has seen. However, the topic of our discussion today is sick certificates. And we will be looking at what does the Health Professional Council of South Africa say about sick certificates, their ethical code of conduct. We're going to talk about backdated medical certificates, certificates of medical attendance, the extension of sick leave and the link of that to medical certificates, who may issue certificates. We're going to talk about medical certificates being issued by nursing staff, so that's non-doctors. We're going to look at traditional healers. We're going to talk a bit about modified sick certificates and how do I validate a sick certificate. It's a fact in South Africa there is a lot of fraudulent medical certificates doing the round. And as employers, we have the responsibility to ensure that the sick certificates that's handed in are valid medical certificates. Remember that when your employee brings in a medical certificate and their sick leave form, whether you use a manual process or whether you use an ESS, so a HR system where employees apply online, the minute that you as the manager has approved that sick leave, that means you approve the sick certificate that was attached to it. And once you have signed it or approved it online, you can't go back and discipline the employee, because it's your responsibility to ensure that all requirements are met before you approve that sick leave transaction. Okay, let me just. So the Health Professional Council of South Africa is the statutory body that regulates specific healthcare professions in South Africa. They oversee healthcare practices. They establish standards for education and training. They have also established the ethical professional standards in a booklet called The Ethical Rules of Conduct for Practitioners registered under the Health Professionals Council. And this booklet is actually available online if you would like to read it. And in this ethical rules of conduct, the rule that we are going to look at today is Rule 16, which deals with the medical certificates. So, and I'm going to break down Rule 16. It's got quite a number of elements under it, and just use actual medical certificates to show how that should look. So the first thing is that the details of the practitioner, the name, the address, and the qualification of the practitioner must be on that certificate. And on this one, we can see the doctors there, the qualification, the institution where he got the qualification is on this specific medical certificate. The second one is the name of the patient must be on the certificate. For the purposes of this presentation, because I've used actual information, I have just blanked that out. But the person's name must be on there. And then Rule 61C says the employment number of the patient, where applicable, must also be on that. Now, very few employers actually insist that the doctor must write the person's employee number on the certificate. However, if it's a rule in your company, then it's the employee's responsibility to inform the doctor that he or she must also add the employment number on the sick certificate. Rule 61D says there's going to be a date and time of the examination. Now, specifically on the sick certificate, the doctor said the person was examined by me, but he left out the time. And again, I have not seen one employer that insists that the time must be on there. But if, from an employer perspective, you want the time that the person was on at the doctor, visited the doctor, is to brief your employees and advise them this is a rule, and we will not accept any sick certificates without the time. But yeah, the HPSCA Rule 61D clearly says the date and the time must be on the sick certificate. The doctor or the medical practitioner must also specify whether the certificate that he or she is issuing, is it being issued as a result of personal observations by the doctor, by the practitioner? In other words, I have examined this person, or is it merely based on information provided by the patient? Now, doctors with pre-printed stationery, they say it's on there according to my knowledge or as I was informed. And according to Rule 16.1, the doctor must specify whether the certificate is issued as a result of either his or her personal observations or as he was informed by the patient. And Rule 16.3 says, if the doctor uses pre-printed stationery, the practitioner must delete the words which are not applicable. In this case, the doctor did not delete the words that were not applicable, so he has given us no indication. And if we read the sentence below, the certificate is issued as a result of personal observations by the practitioner and or information provided or received from the patient. And again, it's a pre-printed stationery, and the doctor was responsible to scratch out which is not applicable. And if you in your business have allowed this, the best would be is to say to employees, to brief employees and say, these are the requirements of medical certificates. Going forward, when you visit your doctor, please make sure that the doctor's medical certificate, before you leave the practice, complies with the rules as set out by the HPSCA. Okay, then the reasons. So Rule 16.1F says, the doctor must give a description of the illness in layman's terminology. So in a language that all non-medical people can understand, but only with the informed consent of the patient. If the patient says, "Doctor, I am sorry, I don't want my employer to know what is wrong with me," the practitioner can merely state that there's a medical condition, which is quite the practice nowadays. I haven't seen a medical certificate in a long time where the doctor actually specifies what is wrong with the person. I think the last one I saw was probably in COVID, where it says COVID. Then Rule 16(1)(g) says the doctor must specify where the patient is totally unable to work. So that is, this person is being booked off, or whether the person can take on light duty, so less strenuous duties in the work situation, depending obviously on the nature of the work. And in this example, the doctor nicely circled, according to my knowledge, the patient is unfit for work from that day to that day. And then that links to Rule 16(1)(h). What is the exact period of recommended sick leave? This doctor said, according to my knowledge, okay, we assume it's according to his knowledge, the person is unfit for work or school from that day. And then here at the bottom, he or she will resume duties on that day. Then the date of issue on the certificate. Now, obviously, this is going to depend from doctor to doctor where it's on the certificate. In this example, it's right at the top. In the second example, it forms part of the content of the sick certificate. This person was examined by me on that date, and that is the date of the examination, first examination and consultation. And then the details of the issuing practitioner. And guys, this is where one has to be wide awake, because this is where a lot of fraud takes place. So Rule 16(1)(j) says, this sick certificate must contain the initial and the surname in block letters of the medical practitioner, as well as the registration number of the practitioner who issued the certificate. Important to understand that every individual medical practitioner has their own registration number, and the practice where there could be 5 or 6 or 7 doctors has a practice number. And if you look at the example on the right, there's the doctor and his medical practitioner number, and at the bottom, his practice number. So Rule 16 says we need to see the initial, the surname, and the registration number of the practitioner on the certificate. Now, if we look at the certificate on the left, I mean, we can see the doctor's names, and clearly it's a stamp that they use, and the stamp is not that good. So in this instance, the employer would have been able to say, take this back to your doctor because this is not good enough. It does not comply with the ethical code of conduct. Where a practice uses a locum, so that's a doctor, we've got one doctor sick, we bring in a temporary doctor to fill in for that person, the locum. This locum did not abide by the rules because the locum should have added his or her initials and surname as well as the registration number. So just based on this, the employer had full right not to accept the medical certificate accepted on face value. It's very important to remember, and according to Rule 15 of this ethical code of conduct, a medical certificate is an official document. It falls into the same category as contracts of qualifications. It's official document. It's an official document, and therefore it needs to be signed properly, and therefore it cannot be changed. And we'll talk about this a bit later on medical certificates that are changed. Backdated medical certificates. So I have been sick from Monday, and today is Friday. So I was off sick Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And I went to the doctor this morning, and the doctor backdates the sick leave. So I was unfit for duty from Monday, which is 4 days earlier. Okay. Do we have to accept that? No, we do not have to accept that. So I can tell the doctor that I have had a back pain. There is no ways that the doctor can, in his professional opinion, confirm that I had back pain because he did not examine me over those 4 days. The other side of the coin is I haven't been at work the whole week. My doctor issued a certificate this morning when he visited me in hospital, but I have been in hospital since Monday. Now, there's a very clear record that I was not able to be at work. I was unfit for duty because I have been hospitalized since Sunday. And in such a case where, and that would be the exception, is a backdated medical certificate is acceptable. In most cases, unless the person was examined by the doctor on the first day of the time that he or she was booked off from work, the company is under no obligation to accept backdated medical certificates. And if that period of backdating, so I need a certificate from day 3. In the example that I've given you, Monday, Tuesday, I didn't need one. I need one for Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I only have one for Friday. Depending on your disciplinary code, the absence on Wednesday and Thursday can be dealt with in terms of the disciplinary code. Obviously, after you have gained all the facts. We also have to be aware of medical attendance certificates. In terms of the BCA, we get sick leave, and that sick leave it can be used when I am physically or mentally unable, so I am incapacitated. I am not able to perform my duties. When I attend a medical appointment, so I am going for my annual blood pressure and cholesterol test tomorrow, that is not illness. It's a standard medical appointment. And once I've been to the doctor, I should be able to go back to work. Some companies do allow sick leave for medical appointments, others not. So in terms of your sick leave policy, this will determine whether you are going to accept a proof of attendance from municipal clinics or from any other doctor. Sorry, such as this one. It's certified that the person attended the clinic today, but then it goes on to say the person is unfit for duty. Okay, in terms of this one, it was merely a proof of attendance. So that on the one on the right hand side, the person wasn't sick, they attended a medical appointment. On the left hand side, the person attended the clinic but was also booked off for work. Then the extension of sick leave. So I was at the doctor on Monday. He booked me off until Wednesday. The doctor may not telephonically extend the time that I was booked off. I need to go and see the doctor, and I need to obtain an additional medical certificate. The doctor is not allowed to change the medical certificate that he issued me with on Monday. And if you get a sick certificate, that has been changed. There's ways that you can validate that, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. Okay, so who may issue a medical certificate? If we look at the BCA, section 23.2, it says the medical certificate must be issued and signed by a medical practitioner or any other person certified to diagnose and treat patients. And the medical practitioner or the other certified person must be registered with a professional council established by an Act of Parliament. If we look at the Health Professional Council, that has been established by an Act of Parliament. In terms of the ethical code for health practitioners, Rule 16.1 refers to a practitioner, and in the ethical code of conduct, a practitioner is defined as a person registered as such under the Act, and this is the Medical Practitioner Act. And in the application of Rule 5, 6, and 9 of the rules, they are a juristic person. The Act also, the Act that we refer to here is the Health Professions Act 55 of 74, and specifically in the Act, it refers to doctors, psychiatrists, dentists, and any other person registered under this Act. Then the Allied Health Professional Council of South Africa. So those are medical people in the medical field, but are not necessarily allowed to diagnose and treat. The Allied Health Professionals Act specifically states that for the purpose of Section 23, there's only certain people or certain occupations that can issue a medical certificate. Now, acupuncture, Chinese medicine, chiropractic, homeopathy, etc. And there's a few that I don't even know what those people do. Nobody else, in terms of allied health professions, can issue a medical certificate to book an employee off from sick leave. People very specifically who may not issue medical certificates, a pharmacist or their appointed staff, social workers, psychologists. Now remember, there's a difference between a psychiatrist, who's firstly a medical doctor and then they specialize in psychiatry, whereas a psychologist cannot diagnose, they can only treat. And a psychologist can't issue a prescription for medication. Occupational therapist, nursing staff, although there are some exceptions, and we'll talk about that now, and then any other person that has not been listed above. So if we look at the nursing staff, so the South African Nursing Council says we recognize what Section 23.2 says. A person that's certified to diagnose and treat patients. However, there are professional nurses who hold who've got additional qualifications, clinical nursing, health assessment, treatment, and care, but they are registered as such by the South African Nursing Council. Such nursing staff may book employees off from work, but for no more than 2 working days. Okay, so if I went to the clinic and the nurse at the clinic booked me off on Monday for Monday and Tuesday, when I go back on Wednesday, he or she cannot issue another certificate for 2 days. Then I must be referred to a practitioner who can book me off for longer if necessary. The very interesting one is traditional healers. So we have the Act, the Traditional Health Practitioners Act 22 of 2007. And through this act, the a council had to be established to oversee the implementation of medical practices by traditional healers. The Act was enforced in 2014, but the following was never enacted. The traditional health practitioners were required to register with the council from the 1st of May 2015. An interim council was established, but in the meantime has been disbanded. This registration would have allowed medical certificates that is issued by traditional health practitioners to serve as proof of your incapacity. So traditional healers would have been able to book me off work. Okay. Once a traditional healer is registered with this practitioners council in South Africa, they have to comply with the sick leave payment, sick leave certificate requirements, as with any other medical practitioner. Okay. However, it was anticipated that the interim council would facilitate the registration and certification of traditional healers, which would have enabled employers to verify the registration of traditional healers who provide sick certificates. Okay. However, this is not realized, and the validity of sick notes issued by traditional healers still remain uncertain. In addition to this, the Minister of Health must still enact the necessary regulations to align traditional healer certificates with the requirements of the BCA. Whenever you see a traditional healer certificate, traditional healer medical certificate with a practice number, this is merely an indication that this traditional healer registered with the interim council that was established in 2005 but no longer exists, or they are registered with a alternative medicine or traditional medicine association. So in total, the Council for Traditional Healers, as envisioned by the Act, is still to be established. Okay, this, however, does not mean that we can now completely disregard traditional healer medical certificates. There was a very, very specific Labour Appeal Court case, Kivich Kroon, Country Estate versus Morledi and others in I don't even have the year on there, but this case set the principles for employers. How do we deal with this? The employee stayed away from work, which the employer considered as unauthorized absence because it did not accept the traditional certificate. CCMA, the Labour Court and the Labour Appeal Court said this is unfair. In South Africa, where we have a lot of traditions and a lot of cultures, beliefs and practices, employers need to attempt to really reasonably accommodate an employee's beliefs. Okay? However, the traditional healer certificate does not comply with Section 23(2) of the BCA because they are not registered medical practitioners with a recognized professional council. And in this case, in accommodating the various beliefs and practices, cultural practices, the principle there was that employers do not have to pay employees who produce traditional healer certificates as proof of absence. You do not have to accept it as sick leave. Employers could accommodate the certificates on the merits, and this is where company policy in terms of leave and in terms of sick leave must be very clear. So I have several clients who say, we will accept the traditional healer certificate as a sick certificate, as long as it clearly stipulates who's the employee, when the employee was booked off. So it meets most of the standards, as for medical practitioners. Other employers say, we are not going to pay the employee for those days. We will see it as unpaid leave, or the employee can choose to take annual leave. However, we are not going to discipline the employee for unauthorized absence. We recognize the right of the employee to visit a traditional healer. Therefore, we will not take disciplinary action against the employee. But from a strict legal viewpoint, we are not going to pay because that certificate is not recognized as a valid sick certificate. Where your business is unionized, this is often addressed already in collective agreements. Okay, so when it comes to traditional healer certificates, there's the one thing that we can't do is we cannot discipline employees if they bring a traditional healer certificate. We cannot see that as unauthorized absence. How we deal with that is going to depend on our company policies, our practices, and any collective agreements. Okay, so I have covered that. So that is very much a company principle. If you haven't had any of these, and if you have not, if it's not contained in your policies, I would recommend that from a management perspective, you start talking about it and rather set the rule before you have to deal with any of these certificates. Modified sick certificates. So I get a medical certificate and I hand in my medical certificate, and either the date of the examination, the date from which I was booked off until the date that I was booked off to, one of those dates have been amended. Okay. That is not acceptable. When there's an amendment on a sick certificate, the a medical practitioner must sign next to it. They must write the surname, the initials and the surname. They must write the medical practice number next to that change. Now, you all will agree with me, a medical certificate doesn't have space for that. So most doctors will take that certificate back and just issue a new certificate if a change is necessary, or if it's an extension, just issue an additional medical certificate. Okay, so now I have the sick certificate and I am not happy with it. What should I do? Okay, your first port of call is you call the medical practitioner or the clinic. But I want to warn you, do not use the telephone number that is on the sick certificate. Double check that telephone number. You can Google. I don't think we use phone books anymore. We mostly use Google because doctors' details are available on the internet. Just make sure that the number you are calling is actually the practice number and not a fraudulent number. So as an employer or an employer representative, you have the right to ask the practitioner whether the employee visited the medical practice on the day in question, whether the employee was booked off and for how long, and if there are any modifications on the sick certificate. Whether this was made by the medical practitioner. Now remember, the medical receptionist is not allowed to change sick certificates on behalf of the doctor or sign on behalf of the doctor. Only the medical practitioner themselves can do that. Okay. You do not have the right to ask the medical practitioner the nature or the reason that the employee visited the doctor. That still remains confidential information. But you have the right to ask all those questions, and you do not need the permission of the employee to check the validity of the medical certificate with the medical practitioner. When you are in doubt about the doctor, is this a real doctor? Okay, on the hpsca.coza website, you can actually go and verify the medical practitioner number. Just by using that number, remember the example earlier, there was the MP number. By typing in that number, you can search on the HPSCA website whether that is really a registered doctor. And once you have typed in, so you will get this, welcome to iRegister, you select a medical practitioner, and then you can, whatever details you have, you can put in there. In this example, I only used the medical practitioner number to do a search, and it actually brought up the details of the doctor. So I knew that this doctor is really a doctor, because now it links back to the practice as well. In this case, it's impossible to verify the registration of the medical doctor, as we can't see it. It's not on there. Okay, the locum did not provide the required information. You can phone the medical practice after you've checked that it's a true number, but you can also validate the information of the medical practice. So on top of the medical certificate, there was a practice number. The first thing that I did with these doctors, I went to, so there I've got Dr. M.S. Hayat, and I actually found him, and the address, the details of this doctor actually corresponded with the address on the medical certificate. There's also a second way is there is a way to verify medical practice numbers. There's the website www.pcns.coza. You type in the doctor's practice number as stated on the medical certificate, and there it gives you the practice number, it gives you the doctor, and in this case it's a real life medical certificate that corresponded. Is the practice active, and whether this doctor can issue medication. Because the doctor can't just issue medication, the practice must have a dispensing license. So 2 ways online that we can just verify whether the doctor and or the medical practice does exist. So that is basically the things that you can do to double check that the medical certificate that your employee hands in is a legal, valid sick certificate. And again, if you have signed that, just remember that you cannot, once you have approved the sick leave with that certificate attached to it, you can't go back and unapprove it, because you had the opportunity to look at it, and now you have approved it, and now you can't go and discipline the employee because you didn't double check the facts. Okay. I just want to go, before we continue, I just want to see whether we have any questions. Just allow me to, I'm trying to make my screen bigger. Okay, so let's see, do we have any questions? Okay, no questions. So I am going to continue. Let me just read that. So in terms of a case study, and this is a real life study with one of our clients where we worked last year. We, apart from checking medical certificates, we implemented, worked with the client to implement an active sick leave management process. So when we started, so the client has 30 employees at that stage, and for the period January to November 2024, they had 118 sick leave days in a matter of 11 months. The cost of that sick leave, if we work in this case, let's say an average salary, that sick leave in the 11 months was 81, let's say 82,000 Rand, rounding it up. We then embarked on a process where we did an overall analysis for the company, just looking at all the sick leave, working out absenteeism rates and working out the cost of the sick leave. And then we started looking at the individuals with very high sick leave. Okay, and remember, this is not a disciplinary process. The attempt here was never to discipline people. It was about understanding what is happening in the lives of employees and how we can help them to manage their sick leave better. So, I mean, 118 days of sick leave in 11 months. If one translates that, it's paying an employee for 5.5 months without that employee doing any work. Now, nobody would do that. Yes, we do it more or less with sick leave. In terms of productivity, it's 118 working days lost, 948 man hours. Can you imagine the impact on productivity in a smaller company that 4.5 months can have, or 5.5 months? So then we started individual discussions with the employees. Not we assisted our client in doing that. And where the average sick leave was around 11.53 days a month. On average, over the next few months, the average sick leave has reduced to 3. There's going to be months which is a 74% decrease in absenteeism, in sick leave. There's going to be months, so if we have an employee that had an injury or need an operation where the sick leave is going to be higher, and that's natural, it's going to happen. This is more about managing the 1 day here and the 2 days there, to ultimately ensure that we are effective in our management and that we can maintain productivity in the company, but also maintain a positive morale of those employees that's at work the whole time. So for this client, initially we managed in the 3 months after that with a 74% decrease in sick leave days. If we convert that into months, I mean, it's six grand a month and sorry, that's got to be indirect costs. So that's just the cost of the salary for that day where the person didn't work, and 68 productivity hours a month. Now, remember, it's an employer with 30 employees. If we can maintain this rate, we're adding 5 months of productivity, one person for 5 months to the company, with 819 productivity hours. And Niels, are you still around? Let me just see if I can unmute you. Okay, sorry, I seem to battle to unmute Niels here. Okay, so sorry, Niels, I was hoping to unmute you, but I think technologically I am probably a bit disadvantaged today. Okay, so when we deal with our clients and we talk about sick leave management, the training of line managers in managing sick leave effectively, it's very crucial. Remember that in no course, in no degree, and in no studies that people do for management are they actually taught to how to deal properly with absenteeism. The analysis of company sick leave, most people, if I ask you today, would you be able to say how many sick leave days your company had in the last 12 months and what was the cost of that? And who are your top 10 users of sick leave? And what have you done about it? And the most important one, sick leave is not a one-time event. Sick leave is a critical process in the business that you need to manage daily. Okay. And as I explained with the dirty kitchen, the one that hasn't been cleaned for a month, initially it's a lot of work. Once you have all the work, once you have dealt with the backlog, it becomes a very easy process. Okay, so I'm just going to stop sharing and then see if I can actually unmute Niels. Okay, Niels, can you unmute? Can you speak up now?
Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, I am still here. I actually did leave a message now as well in the chats, just in case that you guys do miss me in the meeting. But okay, I will anyway just read it off there. Unfortunately, I'm going to leave the meeting early if we didn't finish in time. But I want to say from our side at Rob Dyer Surgical, I am one of the managers here in Cape Town. And we want to thank Alta for her staff and their contribution to our company. We can truly say that regular ongoing management of sick leave applications helps us tremendously to monitor employees' well-being and address potential health concerns proactively. So it also ensures accurate record keeping, reducing the risk of errors that could affect payroll and compliance with the labor law and all the other laws that is applicable. And additionally, it also promotes us to it also promotes operational efficiency by identifying patterns and trends that might require adjustment in staff and workload contribution and distribution. So we highly recommend Alta's business and the services that she provides with her team.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Thank you for that, Niels. I think in the end, sick leave, we all know it's a problem in the business, yet it's one of the areas that we pay the least attention to. I had a meeting early this year with a new client who has asked us to assist with the absenteeism management. And it's a much bigger company, and the cost of their annual sick leave, just in terms of salaries, is nearly 700,000 rand. And my question to the management team was, if we have a production loss of 700,000 rand, what are we going to do? Okay, everybody's going to jump up and down. We're going to investigate and make sure it does not happen again. Yet sick leave is that one area that's actually costing business a lot of money directly, but also indirectly in the loss of productivity, the impact it has on the rest of our staff. And it's hardly ever that we pay the attention to it that it should get. Okay, Cheryl had a question. When do you have the right to send your employee to a company-appointed doctor for a second opinion to see if they are fit and able to work? So, Cheryl, where an employee has a history of a lot of absences, it could be short absences, but many days, it could be a long absence because of a very specific medical condition. One must enter into the medical incapacity process. So having the discussion with the employee, explaining the concern, the impact that the employee has, or the employee's absence has on the business, and then the reason for wanting that professional opinion, the company appointed doctor, and the process. The Code of Good Practice on Dismissal outlines a very clear process for dealing with medical incapacity, and to get a second opinion, how do we get a second opinion to see if they're fit and able, will fall under the medical incapacity process. If you have more questions, Cheryl, you can email me. I'll just put my email in here. And maybe I can just give you better advice there. So generally, you'll follow the medical incapacity process, of which that medical opinion is going to be part of. But yeah, I would like to understand the specific nature of if it's a specific case, we deal with the merits of the case. Any other questions? Okay. So if we have no further questions, I don't see any hands. I thank you all very much for attending the session. There might be a question coming. Oh, thank you, Suzanne. Highly appreciate it. As soon as the transcript is available, the recording, I will make sure that it gets sent to everybody who attended today. Yes, and send me any questions you might have. And let me know whether this was informative, and what about sick leave and sick leave management would you like to know more about? And maybe we can arrange additional sessions on other topics surrounding sick leave management. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of the day. And when the long weekend arrives tomorrow afternoon, be safe and enjoy it. Goodbye, everyone.